Angela's day started like any other. The sun had barely risen when she tied her hair into a neat bun, slipped on her faded black uniform, and hurried to catch the bus that would take her across town. She was used to waking up before most people. The city still felt sleepy at that hour, with only a few cars on the road and a light fog hanging in the air. While many were still curled up in bed, Angela was already preparing herself for another long shift at the cafe. The cafe was not a fancy place. It sat on the corner of a busy street, squeezed between a laundromat and a small grocery shop. The paint on the sign had started to peel, and the windows often looked cloudy from steam rising out of the kitchen. But people still came. Workers on their way to offices, families looking for a cheap breakfast, students stopping for coffee. This cafe was a gathering spot for all kinds of people. For Angela, it was not just a workplace. It was where she spent most of her time, day after day, trying to make ends meet. Angela had been working there for almost 3 years. She wasn't paid much, and the hours were long, but she had learned to keep moving with a smile. She knew almost every regular customer by name. She remembered their orders and their little habits. One man always wanted his coffee with exactly 2 sugars, never 3. A woman always asked for extra napkins even if she barely used them. Angela noticed these details because she believed small acts of care made a difference. Life had not been easy for her. She lived in a small apartment on the edge of town. The rent was high compared to her pay, and she had to watch every penny carefully. Some nights, she went to bed hungry so that her younger brother, who lived with her, could eat enough. But Angela never complained. She carried herself with quiet strength, believing that things would get better as long as she kept working hard. Her co-workers often wondered how she kept her energy. The cafe could be a tough place to work. Customers sometimes snapped at her when their food took too long. Others ignored her as if she were invisible. The manager, Mr. Gordon, was strict and cared more about money than people. If someone spilled coffee or dropped a plate, his sharp voice would echo through the kitchen. Yet Angela handled everything calmly. She greeted rude customers with patience and took criticism without arguing. One thing that set her apart was her kindness. If an elderly customer struggled to carry a tray, she rushed to help. If a child dropped something, she bent down and picked it up with a smile. She never thought of these as big gestures. To her, helping was simply the right thing to do. She had been raised to believe that every person deserves respect, no matter their background or situation. On that particular morning, Angela felt especially tired. She had worked late the night before, covering a shift for a sick co-worker. Her feet ached, and her eyes felt heavy. But when she stepped into the cafe and tied on her apron, she forced a smile. She knew customers expected warmth, not weariness. The bell over the door jingled, and the first rush of morning visitors began. She greeted each one with her usual cheerful tone, balancing trays of food, refilling cups of coffee, and scribbling down orders quickly. She moved with ease, weaving between crowded tables and balancing plates on her arm. A young couple argued quietly at one corner table, while a group of construction workers laughed loudly at another. The cafe was alive with the hum of voices and the clatter of dishes. To many, it was just noise, but Angela had grown used to it. To her, it was the rhythm of her days, a constant background to the life she was building. Even in the busiest moments, Angela never forgot to notice people. She saw the young student sitting alone with a pile of books, his face tense from studying. She brought him an extra glass of water, saying softly, "You look like you need a break." She noticed the elderly woman near the window trying to reach her cane, which had fallen. Without hesitation, Angela stopped mid-order, walked over, and picked it up for her. The woman smiled in relief and whispered a thank you. Small things, but they mattered. Her kindness did not always win her praise. Mr. Gordon often frowned when he saw her taking time for such gestures. "Keep moving," "Angela," he would say. "Time is money." But Angela could not change who she was. She believed work was not only about speed or money, it was about people. And people needed care. Behind her quiet smile, however, Angela sometimes felt the weight of her own struggles pressing heavily. She worried about bills piling up at home. She worried about whether her brother would finish school or if he might give up under the same pressures she faced. There were nights she lay awake wondering if she would ever escape the cycle of endless shifts and low pay. Still, each morning, she told herself one thing: she had to keep going. That morning, as she carried plates to a table near the window, she thought about how life sometimes tested her. She did not know what the day ahead would bring, but she hoped it would be manageable. The cafe was busy, the customers demanding, and the manager already impatient. But Angela, with her usual calm spirit, prepared herself to handle it all. For her, every shift was the same: work hard, stay kind, and hope tomorrow would be better. She had no idea that this particular day would be different. She did not know that soon her kindness would place her at the center of something far bigger than she could imagine. All she knew, as she moved swiftly between tables and smiled at strangers, was that helping people was always worth it, even if no one else noticed. The cafe had begun to slow down from the morning rush. Some customers were finishing their meals, while others lingered with their coffee cups, talking quietly. The sound of spoons tapping against ceramic bowls and chairs scraping the floor filled the air. Angela moved gracefully between tables, checking on each customer with her usual smile. To anyone watching, she looked like the perfect waitress: calm, attentive, and caring. But in the corner near the counter, Mr. Gordon, the manager, was watching closely. He had been keeping his eye on Angela for a while, noticing how she had taken extra time with the man in the wheelchair. He had seen her clear a spot for him, bring him water, and even lean down to talk to him gently. And when she set down the sandwich with his coffee, Mr. Gordon's eyes narrowed. He was a man who measured everything in numbers: tables turned quickly, bills paid on time, and as little waste as possible. To him, kindness was a distraction, not a value. He believed that a good worker was one who moved fast, brought in money, and never lingered at any table longer than necessary. Seeing Angela spend time with Thomas made him restless. Angela, unaware of his gaze, continued her work. She refilled a coffee cup for a man reading his newspaper, picked up plates from another table, and then returned to check on Thomas. She asked softly if he needed anything else. Thomas shook his head, smiling warmly, and thanked her again. She felt a quiet happiness inside her heart, knowing she had done the right thing. But as she turned toward the kitchen, Mr. Gordon stepped out from behind the counter. His shoes clicked sharply against the floor as he crossed the room. Customers looked up, sensing the tension in his steps. He stopped directly in front of Angela. "Angela," he said in a firm voice, "a word with you." She straightened, holding an empty tray in her hands. "Yes, sir." He glanced toward Thomas, then back at her. His tone grew sharp. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Angela blinked, confused. "I'm serving the customers, sir." "Serving the customers," he repeated with a bitter laugh. "Is that what you call it? Spending 10 minutes moving chairs around? Giving away free food?" The cafe grew quieter. Several people stopped eating and looked up. Thomas, sitting by the window, tensed in his seat. Angela spoke carefully. "He needed help getting to a table, and I only wanted him to feel comfortable." As for the food, Mr. Gordon cut her off, his voice rising, "You have no authority to give away anything for free. Do you think this cafe runs on kindness? Do you think your paycheck comes from charity? Every slice of bread, every cup of coffee costs money, Angela. And here you are, handing it out like it grows on trees." Angela felt her cheeks warm. She wanted to explain, to tell him that she had paid for the sandwich herself, but his anger left no space for calm words. She glanced at the customers, who were now watching silently. The cafe, usually buzzing with chatter, had fallen still. "I only wanted to do something kind," she said softly. "He's a veteran. He deserves respect." Mr. Gordon's face tightened. "Respect doesn't pay the bills. Efficiency does. You've been wasting time on one customer when there are 10 others waiting. That is not how this place works." Thomas shifted uncomfortably, his hand gripping the arm of his wheelchair. He looked as though he wanted to speak up, but Angela quickly gave him a small shake of her head, silently telling him not to worry. "Sir," she tried again, her voice steady but calm, "I didn't mean to upset you." "I only enough," Mr. Gordon snapped. His hand pointed toward the door. "You're finished here. Take off your apron and leave." Angela's heart dropped. "You're firing me." "You heard me," he said coldly. "I won't keep an employee who thinks she can make her own rules. I've warned you before about wasting time on small gestures instead of focusing on service. Now you've crossed the line. Pack your things and go." For a moment, Angela couldn't move. The tray trembled slightly in her hands. She looked around the cafe, at the faces staring back at her. Some customers looked shocked, others lowered their eyes as if embarrassed to witness the scene. Not one of them spoke up. Slowly, Angela untied her apron and folded it neatly. She placed it on the counter and stood straight, her dignity intact despite the storm inside her chest. She did not want to cry in front of strangers. She did not want to beg. As she turned to leave, Thomas raised his voice. "Wait a moment." His deep tone filled the cafe. "This woman just showed me more kindness than I've received in months. She gave me respect when others looked away. And you fire her for that?" Mr. Gordon's expression hardened. "Sir, with all due respect, this is none of your concern." "It is my concern," Thomas replied firmly. "Because people like her make places like this worth visiting. Without her, this cafe is just another room with chairs and coffee. You don't see it, but she's the heart of this place." Some customers murmured in agreement, nodding quietly. But Mr. Gordon dismissed their voices. "I run this cafe, and I decide who works here. She's done. That's final." Angela turned back to Thomas, her eyes filled with gratitude for his words. "It's all right," she said softly. "Thank you, but I'll be fine." She picked up her small bag from the corner, walked to the door, and pushed it open. The cool air outside greeted her as she stepped onto the street. She inhaled deeply, letting the chill calm her burning cheeks. Her heart ached, but she forced herself to keep walking. Inside the cafe, silence hung heavy. Thomas sat staring at the door where Angela had just left. His sandwich was half eaten, his coffee cooling, but he no longer cared. His chest filled with both anger and sadness. The customers exchanged glances, whispering quietly about what they had just witnessed. Mr. Gordon, however, returned to the counter as though nothing had happened. He brushed off the stares and mutters, picking up a rag to wipe down the counter. To him, the matter was over. He had made his decision, and in his eyes, it was the right one. But to Thomas, and to several others in that cafe, it was not over. Something about the unfairness of what had happened lingered in the air like a heavy cloud. They could feel it. They knew Angela had been punished for nothing more than showing kindness. And that injustice would not be forgotten so easily. Thomas sat quietly for a moment, staring into his cup. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His fingers moved slowly but deliberately across the screen. He wasn't going to let this end here. The cafe felt strangely heavy after Angela walked out. People still sat at their tables, forks and spoons in their hands, but the cheerful mood that had filled the room earlier was gone. Conversations had grown softer, and the clinking of dishes seemed louder in the quiet. Everyone had seen what happened. Everyone had watched Angela's kindness turn into a reason for her dismissal. Thomas remained at his table by the window. His sandwich lay half-eaten, but he had lost his appetite. His chest felt tight with frustration. He had been through many difficult moments in his life: battlefields, long nights in hospitals, endless paperwork at the veterans' office, but this moment cut deeply in a different way. Seeing someone punished for showing compassion to him reminded him of how often people looked the other way. He lifted his phone and scrolled through his contacts. His hands trembled slightly, not from weakness but from the weight of his decision. After a pause, he pressed a name. The call connected quickly. He spoke quietly, explaining what had just happened. On the other end of the line, a strong voice responded with both surprise and anger. Thomas ended the call, set his phone on the table, and waited. Outside, the street bustled as usual. Cars drove past, and people hurried to work. Nobody passing by could guess that inside the cafe, tension was simmering beneath the surface. Mr. Gordon, standing behind the counter, believed the situation was finished. He polished a cup, rearranged napkins, and gave short instructions to the other staff, pretending as if nothing unusual had happened. But his workers avoided his eyes. They had seen Angela's kindness countless times. Deep down, they knew her firing was unfair. The minutes ticked by slowly. Then the door of the cafe opened with a sharp ring of the bell. The first man to enter wore a neatly pressed uniform, his chest decorated with ribbons that told silent stories of battles fought and missions completed. Behind him, more men followed, all in the same uniform, their steps firm and their presence commanding. They were Marines, strong, disciplined, and carrying an air of respect that filled the room immediately. The customers turned to look. Whispers began to spread. People shifted in their seats, sensing something important was about to happen. Thomas straightened in his wheelchair, a small smile tugging at his lips as he saw familiar faces. These were his brothers in arms, men who had served with him and respected him. They had come because he had called. The Marines greeted him warmly, their voices filled with admiration. One of them placed a firm hand on his shoulder and said, "Good to see you, sir. We came as soon as we heard." Thomas nodded. "I'm glad you're here. I didn't call for myself. I called because something wrong happened today, and it shouldn't be ignored." The Marines exchanged serious glances. Their leader, a tall man with sharp eyes, turned toward the counter. Mr. Gordon stood stiffly, his rag still in his hand. For the first time that morning, he looked uncertain. "Excuse me," the Marine leader said firmly, his voice carrying across the cafe. "We were told that a waitress here was fired for helping this man. Is that true?" Mr. Gordon's mouth tightened. He cleared his throat. "This is a private business. I don't answer to outsiders. My decisions are final." The Marine leader's jaw clenched. "Final or not, we need to understand something. This man sitting here is a decorated veteran. He has served this country with honor. And the young woman who helped him did nothing wrong. In fact, she did what every decent human being should do: she showed respect." A murmur of agreement rose among the customers. Heads nodded. People whispered words like "true" and "right." Mr. Gordon waved his hand dismissively. "That woman gave away food without permission. She wasted time when she should have been serving others. I run this cafe by rules, not by emotions. If she couldn't follow instructions, she didn't belong here." The Marine leader took a step closer, his boots firm on the floor. "Let me tell you something about rules. Out on the battlefield, rules keep men alive. But respect and loyalty, those keep their spirits alive. Without them, rules are nothing but words. That waitress showed both respect and loyalty to a man who gave his strength to this country. And you punish her for it?" The cafe grew silent again. Every eye turned to Mr. Gordon. His face flushed, but he stood stubbornly. Thomas finally spoke, his voice steady. "You don't understand what you've done. She gave me dignity when the world often forgets I exist. Firing her doesn't just hurt her. It sends a message that kindness has no place here." One of the younger Marines, unable to hold back his frustration, turned toward the other customers. "Do you all agree with what happened here? Do you think kindness should cost someone their job?" A woman near the door shook her head firmly. "No. She was the only reason I kept coming back to this place. She treated everyone kindly." Another man spoke up. "She once helped my mother carry her groceries out when she could barely walk. She didn't have to, but she did. She's the reason people felt welcome here." Voices began to rise around the cafe, each person sharing a small story about Angela's acts of kindness. Some spoke about how she remembered their names. Others mentioned how she noticed when someone was struggling and always offered help. The Marines listened closely, their expressions hardening with every word. They realized Angela's actions were not a one-time gesture. They were a reflection of who she was every single day. Finally, the Marine leader turned back to Mr. Gordon. "You may own this cafe, but you don't own the respect of this community. By firing her, you've shown everyone here what truly matters to you, and it isn't people. We won't support a place that treats kindness as a weakness." With that, he looked at his men. "We're leaving. And I suggest the rest of you consider whether you want to support a business that punishes compassion." One by one, the Marines turned and headed for the door. Their steps echoed with quiet power. Several customers stood as well, leaving their half-finished meals behind. Chairs scraped as people followed the Marines out. Some dropped a few coins on their tables, but most walked away in silence, making their disapproval clear. Within minutes, the cafe that had been full that morning was nearly empty. Only a handful of customers remained, sitting stiffly and avoiding eye contact. Mr. Gordon stood behind the counter, his rag now crumpled in his hand, watching his cafe empty in front of him. Outside, the group of Marines surrounded Thomas, who had rolled his wheelchair out to join them. They spoke with him, thanking him for his service and praising Angela for her courage. "Don't worry," one Marine said. "We'll make sure she's not left alone in this. People like her deserve better, and we'll help her find it." Thomas smiled faintly, his heart lifting for the first time that day. Angela's kindness had sparked something larger than either of them had expected. It had drawn people together, shown them the value of respect, and reminded them that compassion was never a mistake. As the group moved down the street, more people looked on, whispering about what had happened in the cafe. The story was already spreading. And though Angela did not yet know it, her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. The sun had shifted higher in the sky by the time Angela returned home that day. Her small apartment felt unusually quiet. She placed her bag on the worn-out couch and sat down slowly, her mind replaying the scene from the cafe over and over. The harsh words of Mr. Gordon still rang in her ears, and although she had held her head high as she walked out, now she allowed herself to feel the weight of it. Losing her job was not something small. She depended on that paycheck to cover rent, groceries, and her younger brother's school expenses. The thought of what would happen next pressed heavily on her heart. Yet, beneath the worry, there was a calmness too. She had not been fired for doing something wrong. She had been fired for doing something right. That thought gave her a quiet kind of strength. Angela didn't know that while she sat in her small apartment, her story was already spreading. The Marines who had walked out of the cafe had not stayed silent. They spoke to people on the street, to shop owners, and even to local reporters they knew. Customers who had witnessed the event told their families, who then told others. By the afternoon, people across the town were already talking about the waitress who lost her job for helping a veteran. The next morning, Angela was woken by a knock on her door. She opened it to find Thomas sitting in his wheelchair, a warm smile on his face. Behind him stood two Marines from the group that had stormed out of the cafe. Angela was surprised. "Thomas," she said softly, "what are you doing here?" "I couldn't let what happened yesterday just fade away," he replied. "You gave me kindness when no one else did. Now it's time for others to show you the same." The Marines stepped forward. "Ma'am," one of them said respectfully, "we've spoken to several people. The story of what happened has already reached many. People are angry that you were treated so unfairly. And some of us think it's time you were given something better than that cafe." Angela blinked, unsure of how to respond. She had never sought attention, never wanted to be in the center of a story. She had only acted out of instinct, out of compassion. But now, her small action had touched many hearts. Later that day, Thomas and the Marines invited her to join them at a community center where veterans often gathered. When she entered the room, she was met with warm applause. Men and women, some in uniforms and others in plain clothes, stood to thank her. Many of them had faced days where they felt invisible, where kindness was scarce. To them, Angela's gesture was more than a small meal, it was a reminder that their service was still valued. One elderly veteran took her hand gently and said, "You may think you just gave a man a sandwich, but to us, you gave something greater. You gave dignity." Angela's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "I only did what anyone should do," she said quietly. Word of the event continued to spread. Soon, a local newspaper printed the story with the headline, "Waitress Fired for Helping Veteran Community Speaks Out." Pictures of Angela smiling humbly next to Thomas appeared in the article. From there, the story reached even further, appearing on social media and sparking conversations across towns and cities. People from different places began sending messages of support. Some wrote about how they had faced similar struggles in workplaces where compassion was overlooked. Others shared how the story had inspired them to act with more kindness in their own lives. Back at the cafe, things were changing too. After the Marines and customers walked out, the cafe struggled. Tables that were once full remained empty. Regular customers stopped coming. Mr. Gordon could not understand why his business was suddenly losing so much. But the truth was clear to the community. Without Angela's warmth, the cafe felt cold and unwelcoming. People no longer wanted to spend their mornings in a place that punished kindness. Meanwhile, opportunities began opening for Angela. A veteran-owned restaurant in the nearby district heard about her story and reached out. They offered her a position with better pay and a team that valued compassion as much as service. When she walked into her new workplace for the first time, she was greeted with respect and smiles. The owner, himself a retired Marine, shook her hand and said, "We don't just serve food here. We serve people. And you already know how to do that better than anyone." Angela accepted the job with gratitude. For the first time in years, she felt truly valued, not just as an employee but as a person. She still worked long hours, but now her efforts were appreciated. Her kindness was seen as a strength, not a weakness. Thomas often visited her at the new restaurant. Sometimes he came alone, other times with his fellow Marines. Each time, Angela greeted him with the same warmth she had shown that first day in the cafe. Their friendship grew, built on respect and gratitude. One evening, as the restaurant buzzed with happy voices and clinking glasses, Thomas raised his cup toward Angela. "To kindness," he said with a smile. "It changes more than we know." Angela laughed softly, lifting her own glass of water. "To kindness," she echoed. Around them, others joined in, their voices blending together. It was a simple moment, but one filled with meaning. In the weeks that followed, Angela's life settled into a new rhythm. She still faced challenges, bills, responsibilities, the endless demands of daily life, but now she carried with her the knowledge that kindness was never wasted. What had started as a simple act of helping one man had turned into a chain of events that touched many lives. Her story continued to inspire people. Teachers shared it with students, reminding them that compassion matters more than convenience. Families spoke of it at dinner tables, telling their children that doing the right thing is never wrong, even when it comes at a cost. Angela herself remained humble. She never thought of herself as a hero. She saw herself simply as a person who had acted according to her heart. But those around her knew better. They saw her as proof that one small act could ripple outward and create change. On quiet nights, when she sat by her window looking out at the lights of the city, Angela often thought back to that morning at the cafe. She remembered the way Thomas had struggled to find a place, the way the sandwich had brought light to his eyes, and the way her life had shifted forever after those moments. She knew now that life had strange ways of rewarding those who stayed true to their values. She had lost a job, but in its place, she had gained respect, friendship, and a future brighter than she had dared to hope for. And so her story closed not with defeat, but with hope. For Angela, kindness had never been a choice, it was who she was. And the world had shown her that when kindness is given freely, it always finds its way back, multiplied in ways one cannot always imagine.